Kliff Kingsbury's offense in Arizona was bland, predictable, and it limited itself by its design. He was obsessed with curl routes to the point that it handicapped his quarterback and all of his receivers, and nobody suffered more because of it than wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Curl routes have their value when properly complemented with other routes, and they're designed for short gains and situational football, but an over-reliance on them is illogical and oftentimes cowardly, so this immediately limited Hopkins. But even while every second route was a curl or stop route, he was still able to showcase his quality in those scenarios. Our first play is Hopkins going against Jalen Ramsey in press man coverage. Hopkins is going to run a curl route first, and he's going to run it with exceptional technical precision and at great speed. The first thing to note is how he gets past Ramsey at the line of scrimmage. He's going to move his left foot forward while his body stays square, as if he's going to go directly into the body of a defender. But in this super slow motion, we can see the left foot drag across the ground by the marking in the turf that appears for a split second. This highlights the very subtle hesitation that Hopkins uses to get into his route cleanly. It's really an oxymoron because it's smooth and fast, but also hesitation, so he's slowing the cornerback while he's still moving at speed. Ramsey does a good job to stay in control and puts himself in a good position at the top of Hopkins' route, but his posture means he's carrying upfield faster than the wide receiver is. Hopkins' footwork to stop sharply in his route is great, but what really makes this route rare is how he pulls in his upfield shoulder and straightens his arm inside so that Ramsey can't impact his body and slow him down as he turns. This allows Hopkins to work back to the ball cleanly. From the end zone angle, we can see that without that fluid movement, Ramsey's outstretched arm was right there to disrupt the catch point. Because Hopkins could shield the ball and secure it with two hands, Ramsey had no chance to stop him. That's elite receiver play overcoming elite coverage. Hopkins gets plenty of plaudits for his ability to make circus catches, and we'll get to his ball skills later, but his route running and quickness are severely underrated traits that help to make him uncoverable. Let's start simple. This is a slant route against Patrick Surtain. Surtain isn't Ramsey, but he's not far off, and he's 6'2", 202 pounds with elite athleticism. We saw Hopkins lead with his back foot against Ramsey. This time he goes directly to Surtain and leads with his front foot. This essentially resets the line of scrimmage and closes the space between the two. Surtain's response is to backpedal, which widens his turn and creates space between him and Hopkins. Hopkins' release set him up to plant his outside foot and make one hard cut inside. He's already wide open at this point of his route before finishing the play strong against the arriving safety to gain 7 yards. These routine plays are made all the more easier by having Hopkins on the field. His intelligence is off the charts, which aids him in being arguably the best possession receiver in the NFL. Here we see Hopkins making a sight adjustment against a blitz. The slot cornerback outside will cross his face just before the snap. Hopkins instantly diagnoses the coverage and cuts off his route so that his quarterback can throw to him in space straight away. He then fights through contact after the catch to cross the first down line as well. Hopkins makes the right read pretty much every single time. Tight ends are often referred to as a quarterback's best friend because they create easy completions and can be relied upon for possession plays. Hopkins is like a tight end in that regard, but with the skill set of an elite wide receiver. In the same game against the 49ers, Hopkins lines up in the same spot as the inside slot receiver. This time he's running a crossing route. The defense blitzes again and the cornerback over him doesn't cover Hopkins again, but even though the initial space is there, Hopkins doesn't immediately abandon his route and turn around. He instead reaches this point of his route and is directed towards the spot he's supposed to go to in the middle of the field, but Hopkins reads the positioning and the posture of the two defenders reacting to him. He knows he will be bracketed by them if he continues going upfield in his route. Since the underneath defender is committed to the deeper crossing route at this stage, Hopkins can come wide open and create a clear passing lane for his quarterback by cutting sharply beneath him. He then finishes the play off with a good hands catch and falls forward for the first down again. Switching to the New Orleans Saints game, this time Hopkins lines up outside the numbers before motioning into a stack in the slot. This is purposeful to push the cornerback off the line of scrimmage. Hopkins angles his release aggressively to the inside. He's hoping the outside cornerback is forced inside to the traffic that is naturally created by the defenders in the middle of the field. But the cornerback is actually switching assignments, so Hopkins is picked up by the slot defender rather than the outside cornerback coming in with him. The defender tried to surprise Hopkins by shaping to take his vertical route before quickly jumping into his pass. Hopkins wastes no time adjusting to his new picture of the coverage. He uses his left foot to plant hard and push aggressively upfield. He elongates that first step so that he gets to the outside shoulder of the cornerback as soon as possible, pushing through him vertically so that the defender is forced to turn with him. The defender is now looking away from the quarterback in the backfield. Hopkins is releasing vertically and the cornerback is now in a recovery position, so he's reacting to the receiver. Hopkins uses that to his advantage with one vertical step to keep the defender inside and behind him, before turning sharply outside on a corner route. This maximises the space between the two players and makes it impossible for the cornerback to run with Hopkins. When we switch to the end zone angle, we can see just how much separation Hopkins actually created. He was wide open. Hopkins has great understanding of leverage and how to use his body. He can create space by leaning his large frame into defenders to manipulate them, but he can also win by just being flat out quicker than the best athletes on the field through his routes. He's so smooth through his breaks that his success often looks like it was too easily achieved to actually be impressive, and it's more likely down to bad cornerback play, but that's not the case. Ever since he was Andre Johnson's replacement during his rookie season, Hopkins has shown off outrageous ball skills. He particularly excels at reading the flight of the ball early before using his insane hand strength to snag it out of the air. This is valuable at every level of the defense. First, we see Hopkins run this curl route against the Chargers from the slot where he's knocked off his spot by the linebacker coming across the field. Hopkins wants to establish inside, but the contact with the linebacker takes him off his spot and disrupts the timing of the play design. With the safety lingering, an accurate on-time throw from the quarterback here is likely to be intercepted. Hopkins is somehow able to fend off the linebacker, then fall inside in such a way that he can reach out for the ball before he hits the ground. Just getting a hand to this ball is a big play because it prevents the interception, but Hopkins somehow pulls it in to save the completion too. Let's revisit the Jalen Ramsey matchup. Ramsey is again going to play really good coverage here against Hopkins on a sideline route. He stays on top of Hopkins early in the route, then looks back for the ball inside while squeezing away Hopkins' space behind him. But Hopkins still gains 25 yards. It's his ability to read the coverage early and look back for the ball at the earliest possible point that allows him to disengage Ramsey and meet the ball in the air before the cornerback can become a factor. This isn't even really a back shoulder throw because the ball is high into the inside. Hopkins just makes it work anyway. Cornerbacks often look stupid in scenarios such as this because they seem like they're lost, but it's Hopkins' intelligence and ball skills in these scenarios that give the quarterback a huge window to hit, and in turn, a huge margin for error in their throws. Without Hopkins in the team, Kyler Murray and whoever else plays in Arizona will have to be more precise in everything they do. This play against the Minnesota Vikings, for example, is an incompletion, but all but the 1% of the receivers in the league. Hopkins releases outside of the cornerback who turns his back to the quarterback. Hopkins is well covered, but he critically is looking back to the ball early in the route, and he gets his hands up first before the defender to create space for himself. That action stops the defender impacting the ball, and Hopkins makes the catch. The end zone angle highlights how he pulls the ball up off the floor for the completion. Hopkins' body shape is always exactly what it should be for the specific situation he's in. That allows him to catch the ball with the best possible technique, leading to the highest chance of him securing the catch. Even on this play where Hopkins does a good job to recognise the soft spot in the zone and drift into it, he uses the perfect body shape to avoid taking a big hit. Firstly, Hopkins crouches slightly and catches the ball into his body. He is minimising the surface area the defenders have to hit and making sure the ball isn't exposed. At the same time, he's extending his right foot so he can push back in the opposite direction to where the ball is going. This allows him to reposition himself slightly, which is enough to avoid the brunt force of the hits from the two defenders coming into him. They end up hitting each other instead. All Hopkins suffers is a wrap tackle where he never even goes to the ground. When you're a high volume receiver, you have to be able to protect yourself. We start this play with the ball in the air. Hopkins is running a crossing route into the most dangerous area of the field. He's looking back at the ball and his momentum is taking him from left to right. The deep safety is not so deep and actually in the perfect position to explode through Hopkins' body immediately after the ball arrives. Again, Hopkins catches the ball into his body and gives the defender the smallest possible surface area to hit. He also slows his momentum at the same time and begins to turn. The receiver actually turns so quickly that he's backwards when the defender hits him. It exposes him to a hard fall, but it means his body is beneath the ball when he goes to the ground, so there's no real chance of him losing control of it. Against the Los Angeles Chargers, we see Hopkins run a similar route with a safety waiting for him once again, but this time the setup is slightly different. The safety is further away and he has a less dangerous angle to the receiver. Hopkins can anticipate him coming. The end zone angle reveals that Hopkins catches the ball away from his body this time, which is critical because it means he doesn't have to break stride. He uses that speed to immediately enter a spin and evade the incoming hit, and from there he runs in the 33-yard touchdown. Hopkins is still a number one receiver with elite traits, elite consistency, and he is probably the most rounded skill set of all the elite receivers. Adding him to your team this late in the offseason without even having to give up a draft pick feels like cheating.